Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Book Time with Elvis with me, Mark. I do hope so much you're doing very well, and welcome back to this Historathon read aloud I am doing of the Reverend James Bakey's Peeps at Many Lands, Ancient Egypt. Historathon, of course, if you don't know by now, is a year-long event started by Vin from Revenant Reads with a wonderful plethora of co-hosts, of which I count myself lucky to be included among. The first part of this Historathon event is from prehistory to 500 AD, and that covers the first 3 months of this year. And then you can see, I'll pop up the schedule, you can see how it pans out from there on. So let's crack on with our story. I think it's quite interesting. I hope you agree. I've found it quite fascinating, to be honest. So let's go. Chapter 7, Some Fairy Tales of Long Ago. The Little Brown Boys and Girls Who Lived in Egypt 3,000 Years Ago. It's an old book, by the way, from Project Gutenberg at the beginning of the 20th century. So, I mean, you probably watched it up to now, so you might know that that's the case. So the language may be a little bit, not correct for these days, perhaps, but I don't think it's meant, to be honest, in this particular way, in a necessarily negative way, just kind of pointing out that kind of difference maybe. But I don't know. It's not up to me to judge. So let's carry on. Some fairy tales of long ago. The little brown boys and girls who lived in Egypt 3,000 years ago were just as fond as you are of hearing wonderful stories that begin with "Once upon a time." And I want, in this chapter, to tell you some of the tales that Tahuti and Senseb used to listen to in the evening when school was over and play was done. The oldest of all wonder tales, stories that were old and had long been forgotten, ages before the Sleeping Beauty and Jack and the Beanstalk were first thought of. One day, when King Khufu, the great king who built the biggest of the pyramids, had nothing else to do, he called his sons and his wise men together and said, "Is there anyone among you who can tell me the tales of the old magicians?" Then the king's son, Prince Baufra, stood up and said, "Your Majesty, I can tell you of a wonder that happened in the days of your father, King Seneferu. It fell on a day that the king grew weary of everything and sought through all his palace for something to please him, but found nothing. Then he said to his officers, 'Bring to me the magician Zazamank. Zazamank. I have sought through all my palace for some delight, and I have found none.' Then says Zazamank, I can't say it, apologies. Zazamank, 'Let thy majesty go in thy boat upon the lake of the palace, and let 20 beautiful girls be brought to row thee, and let their oars be of ebony, inlaid with gold and silver, and I myself will go with thee, and the sight of the water birds, and the fair shores, and the green grass will cheer thy heart.' So the king and the wizard went down to the lake, and the 20 maidens rowed them about in the king's pleasure galley. 9 rowed on this side, and 9 on that, and the 2 fairest stood by the 2 rudders at the stern, and set the rowing song, each for her own side. And the king's heart grew glad and light, as the boat sped hither and thither, and the oars flashed in the sunshine to the song of the rowers. But as the boat turned, the top of the steering oar struck the hair of one of the maidens who steered, and knocked her coronet of turquoise into the water, and she stopped her song, and all the rowers on her side stopped rowing. Then his majesty said, 'Why have you stopped rowing, little one?' And the maiden answered, 'It is because my jewel of turquoise has fallen into the water.' 'Row on,' said the king, 'and I will give you another.' But the girl answered, 'I want my own one back, as I had it before.' So King Seneferu called Zazamank to come to him, and said, 'Now, Zazamank, I have done as you advised, and my heart is light. But behold, the coronet of this little one has fallen into the water, and she has stopped singing, and spoiled the rowing of her side, and she will not have a new jewel, but wants the old one back again.' Then Zazamank the wizard stood up in the king's boat, and spoke wonderful words, and lo, the water of one half of the lake rose up, and heaped itself upon the top of the water of the other half, so that it was twice as deep as it was before, and the king's bark rode upon the top of the piled up waters, But beyond it, the bottom of the lake lay bare, with the shells and pebbles shining in the sunlight, and there upon a broken shell lay the little rower's coronet. Then Zazamankh leapt down and picked it up and brought it to the king, and he spake wonderful words again, and the water sank down and covered the whole bed of the lake, as it had done at first. So his majesty spent a joyful day and gave great rewards to the wizard Zazamankh. When King Khufu heard that story, he praised the men of olden times, but another of his sons, Prince Hordadef, stood up and said, O king, that is only a story of bygone days, and no one knows whether it is true or a lie, but I will show thee a magician of today. Who is he? Hordadef, said King Khufu, and Hordadef answered, His name is Dedi. He is 110 years old, and every day he eats 500 loaves of bread and a side of beef, and drinks 100 jugs of beer. Oh, he sounds like a good chap, eh? He knows how to fasten on a head that has been cut off. He knows how to make a lion of the desert follow him, and he knows the plan of the house of God that you have wanted to know for so long. Then King Khufu sent Prince Hordadef to bring Dedi to him, and he brought Dedi back in the royal boat. The king came out and sat in the colonnade of the palace, and Dedi was led before him. Then said his majesty, Why have I never seen you before, Dedi? And Dedi answered, Life, health, strength, to your majesty. A man can only come when he is called. Is it true, Dedi, that you can fasten on a head which has been cut off? Certainly I can, your majesty. Then said the king, Let a prisoner be brought from the prison, and let his head be struck off. But Dedi said, Long life to your majesty, do not try it on a man. Let us try a bird or an animal. Personally, I think I would prefer it tried on a man than a poor little innocent animal, but there you go. So a goose was brought, its head was cut off, and the head was laid at the east side of the hall, and the body at the west. Then Dedi rose and spoke wonderful words, and behold, the body of the goose waddled to meet the head, and the head came to meet the body. They joined together before his majesty's throne, and the goose stood up and cackled. Then, when Dedi had joined to its body again the head that had been struck off from an ox, and the ox followed him lowing, King Khufu said to him, Is it true, O Dedi, that you know the plans of the house of God? It is true, your majesty, but it is not I who shall give them to you. Who then? Said the king. It is the eldest of 3 sons who shall be born to the lady... Oh, couldn't have easy names, could they? The lady Rudidet, wife of the priest of Ra, the sun god, and Ra has promised that these 3 sons shall reign over this kingdom of thine. When King Khufu heard that word, his heart was troubled, but Dedi said, Let not your majesty's heart be troubled. Thy son shall reign first, then thy son's son, and then one of these. So the king commanded that Dedi should live in the house of Prince Hordadef, and that every day there should be given to him 1,000 loaves, 100 jugs of beer, and an ox, and 100 bunches of onions. Oh my gosh. Sorry. I don't know if I should say it. Well, there's a live made yesterday. So that's Friday the 13th of January, where onions in ancient Egypt crop up in a conversation I have with Sean D. Standfast, and then you'll understand my chuckling, but I won't mention it here. I think once was enough. When the 3 sons of Rudidet were born, Ra sent 4 goddesses to be their godmothers. They came attired like travelling dancing girls, and one of the gods came with them, dressed like a porter. And when they had nursed the 3 children a while, Rudidet's husband said to them, My ladies, what wages shall I give you? So he gave them a bushel of barley, and they went away with their wages. But when they had gone a little way, Isis, the chief of them, said, Why have we not done a wonder for these children? So they stopped and made crowns, the red crown and the white crown of Egypt, and hid them in the bushel of barley, and sealed the sack and put it in Rudidet's store chamber, and went away again. A fortnight later, when Rudidet was going to brew the household beer, there was no barley, and her maidservant said, There is a bushel, but it was given to the dancing girls, and lies in the storeroom sealed with their seal. So the lady said to her maid, Go down and fetch it, and we shall give them more when they need it. The maid went down, but when she came to the storeroom, lo, from within there came a sound of singing and dancing, and all such music as should be heard in a king's court. So in fear she crept back to her mistress and told her that Ruddidet went down and heard the royal music, and she told her husband when he came home at night, and their hearts were glad because their sons were to be kings. But after a time the Lady Ruddidet quarrelled with her maid and gave her a beating, as ladies sometimes did in those days, and the weeping maid said to her fellow servants, "Shall she do this to me? She has borne 3 kings, and I will go and tell it to His Majesty King Khufu." So she stole away first to her uncle and told him of her plot, but he was angry because she wished to betray the children to King Khufu, and he beat her with a scourge of flax. And as she went away by the side of the river, a great crocodile came out of the water and carried her off. But here, alas, our story breaks off, for the rest of the book is lost. What? Oh my goodness, you see, I haven't read this before you, so the rest of the book is lost, so we don't even know what happens. Oh my goodness. Oh dear, oh dear. Oh, sorry about that. So the rest of the book is lost, and we cannot tell whether King Khufu tried to kill the 3 royal babies or not. Only we do know that the first 3 kings of the race which succeeded the race of Khufu bore the same names as Ruddidet's 3 babies, and were called, like all kings of Egypt after them, sons of the sun. These then are absolutely the oldest fairy tales in the world. Well, they might not be, of course, now. And if they do not seem very wonderful to you, you must remember that everything has to have a beginning, and that the people who made these tales hadn't had very much practice in the art of storytelling. Brilliant, brilliant. So there we go. We'll be back soon with chapter 8, which has some more fairy tales of long ago continued. So thank you very much for watching. Do take care, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.